internet brethren. I don't have anything to talk about today. Oh. Anyway. Queue for specific dungeons. Yeah, I don't have anything new to report today. I guess I don't know if we did or didn't have an interesting discussion yesterday. I'll find something to say so I can not waste your people's time. But we did good today. We really did. We did shoulders and then biceps and cardio. We did 20 minutes on the elliptical and 10 minutes on the row machine, which is fun, especially if you're doing shoulders. You can get rear delts if you change the way you pull on the thing there, versus like a traditional row is going to have more lat activation. But if you bring your grip up a little higher and kind of pinch your elbows together, it gets more rear delts than lats. So you can actually, on a back day, you can do a regular row kind of to your lats, and on a shoulder day, you can do a higher row, basically. Pull it to your shoulders like a face pull almost. Because rear delts are a nightmare to get, for me at least. Proper form in a rear delt exercise is a nightmare. But my CrossFit team misses me. I miss them too. But I told them I have to wait until a little while longer before I can start doing CrossFit again to make sure I'm 100% recovered, so I don't end up making myself sick again. They offered me pizza and I said no. I said, I got a diet I got to stick to for a while. So that way, when I do start up CrossFit again, I can start at like 210, like a lean 210 probably. The thing is, though, is that putting on size through CrossFit's not always like, it's difficult to put on like actual size doing CrossFit. It's always leaner muscle. It's more about like getting trim and all that stuff. But, so if I do start up CrossFit again at 210, I'll have to really increase what I eat to get myself bigger. But my CrossFit routine will still consist of like 2 to 3 days a week of CrossFit, and then 2 to 3 days a week worth of just regular weightlifting. And I'll have to change the target muscle groups from like triceps and chest the same day. Where was I working my arms? Oh yeah, arms and legs on the same day, and then back and shoulders on the same day. So I have those 3 days a week, and then 3 days of CrossFit every week, and have 1 day off, or do 3 days of weight training like I just said, and then 2 days of CrossFit and take 2 days off. It might be better given what we went through this last couple months. 2 days of rest might be advised. But let's see, neither here nor there, right? What's strange is neither and neither. What's the name of a word that's spelled the same but means something different? Like tier and tear, right? Are they spelled the same? I might also be dyslexic, so give me a moment. Tear. Mr. Gorbachev teared down this wall. Mr. Gorbachev. Gorbachev. Yeah, Mr. Gorbachev teared down this wall. Right. The name of two words that are spelled the same and have different meanings, right? Let's see what this is. Leah would know. Words that have the same spelling but different meaning. What are these called? Polynomials or something? Homographs. Polynomials. What the fuck is a polynomial then? Is that a science term? Polynomial is a mathematical expression with variables. Oh, so like with the right. Right. No, I was right, because letters are like variables, right? And they're words, right? It's like, can't you just be wrong sometimes? Why would I do that? Because Because variables are letters and words are just a bunch of variables, right? Perfect. Glad you see it my way. Polynomials it is then. It is absolutely freezing, so I've got my Kanye's on today. Make sure I stay warm because I don't want my feet to freeze to the ground. I need to get some house slippers here soon. I really have no reason to be running these instances other than the fact that if I weren't, I would be sitting down and flipping through TikTok and doing nothing with my day. So at the very least, trying to think if anything else happened. Oh, yeah, they voted to open up the government, I guess. You know, it's sad at 35 years old, I'm still not entirely sure how that process works when they say like, oh, the government, they voted, but now it has to go to the super Congress or whatever. You're like, what the fuck? I know it's just the Senate, the Congress, or whatever. I don't know which comes first, though. So now they voted to pass it, and what are the chances of them saying no? Like, slim to none? Well, we're almost fully recovered from Rabda, and that's great. I really like to give it an honest, like, the next year, once I'm fully, like, ready to get back to it, because, like, full-time and all that stuff. We'll see, though, because I've always wanted to do, like, an actual, like, get cut, and then do an actual, like, real deal bulk, not like, I just feel like eating 5,000 calories every day because I love eating food like everybody else, right? Whereas, more often than not, the Trail of Tears doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? It's like I got this new glyph. It makes me like a machine gun mage. It's pretty sweet. Ugh. Yeah, and I can't play music anymore because the videos don't post correctly to anything else because of copyright infringement. So what's the policy or the law? Like, if you monetize, it shouldn't matter if you don't monetize your videos, which you're probably thinking, why wouldn't you? Well, because whatever, nobody watches the shit anyway, that's why. But the idea is, shouldn't they only be able to, like, isn't there such a thing called like fair use, where if you're not trying to like make a profit from somebody else's like work, then you can use it to whatever. Do I have to dress up like Weird Al and then I can say it's parody and then it doesn't matter? You know, there's what is it called, the 10% law or whatever, where if something is just, which is kind of hard to determine. How do you determine something is 10% different? It's subjective, right? Like, oh, well, the joke they made on Rick and Morty was the Gazorp field or whatever. Whether they made it on the show or on the commentary, but at some point in time they were like, yeah, well, the Garfield people, they really don't like it whenever you rip off their cartoon or whatever. But they were saying like there's like a 10% law where if you make the thing 10% different, then they can't do anything about it. But how do you determine whether something that's subjective is 10% different? You get what I'm saying? Like, oh, we changed this color to pink. Okay, how many percent different is that? Right? It's like, it's kind of a stupid thing, right? Doesn't really make any sense. So how do you value, how do you determine things being different if they're subjective? Like, oh, they put arms on his head. It's like, okay, so if they change his color and put arms on his head, is that 10% different? Or is someone going to say, no, that's only 9% different. You got to do something else. You know, it's like, is there a committee, a lawyer, a judge that has to decide these things? And if so, do you get to like plead your argument as to why you think it's 10% different and they don't? It's kind of a silly process probably. But one of the things, I was watching a documentary the other day, if you guys like conspiracy theories or whatever, it's not necessarily a conspiracy theory, but it was the, what I managed to derive from what I watched about it was like, it was just a media publicity stunt thing that they did for the Beatles, was the Paul McCartney is dead conspiracy, if you guys are familiar with it, where they kept saying like, if you play the record backwards, you can clearly hear it say Paul is dead. They're like, no, you can't. You know what I mean? It's like, you mean to tell me that, and from the documentary that I watched, this somehow ended up in an American courtroom of all places. So it's like a magistrate or whatever, a judge is or whatever, you know, it's like at some point in time, you mean to tell me that our legal system in some way, shape, or form got bogged down with the garbled backwards message of something that like up for interpretation, right? Like I said, it's subjective. How did that end up in a courtroom is what I want to know. And like, how many people were pissed off that they had to have their time wasted for that? Which I guess what it ended up amounting to was it was like a big publicity stunt. And they had to, I guess, have some of the guys testify from the Beatles to say, whether it was the Beatles or the producers or whatever, that did you in any way, shape, or form conspire to foment this rumor that Paul McCartney had died to sell records or whatever? Like, is that against the law to do that? You know what I mean? Is it against the law to, I mean, I wouldn't advise it, but is it against the law to, I mean, even though it's like not a conventional marketing strategy or whatever you would say, it's like, is it against the law to do that? I'm not familiar with why it would be, right? It's like promotion, right? So at any point in time, do you think it was just one of those things that got blown out of proportion because it was the Beatles, and then they drug it into a courtroom to make it an even bigger deal, and like then it did turn into a media circus and all this other shit that goes along with it? Because I cannot imagine at some point in time what type of court, civil court, I know it wasn't criminal, but whatever, you're like, how the fuck does a band of British people that did not even do something, and the people, like, what it started off, I guess it was like one radio DJ somewhere in the UK said that, yeah, if you play it backwards, it says Paul is dead. And then, like, if you listen to it, like, not really, you know what I mean? Not really. Very bizarre. And, like, how that ends up in an American courtroom makes you wonder. It's like, if it weren't a publicity stunt before, it sure as shit is now, right? But it was called the Winged Beatles documentary. It's kind of a schizophrenic documentary, though. I think it's called the Winged Beatles. Yeah, it's kind of a schizophrenic documentary to watch. Yeah. If you guys like those kind of things, oh, another one that's a super good documentary that's not quite as schizophrenic, but one of those, like, is Stanley Kubrick's Boxes, if you've ever seen it. It speculates that Stanley Kubrick had cut a deal with NASA after he made 2001: A Space Odyssey to fake the moon landing. And I mean, it's more like, it probably isn't true, but it's more plausible than some of the other, you know, conspiracy theories that people have floated about in the past and all that. But this was really interesting, though. They explained that after he had made 2001: A Space Odyssey, that for some reason he was like one of the only directors in Hollywood that had like full creative control over all of his work, like Final Cut or whatever they call it, where it like whatever he says goes, basically. Like can't tell the guy what to do, nothing, right? And with Barry Lyndon, which is a movie he made after 2001: A Space Odyssey, NASA, for some reason, now this is bizarre, right? NASA, of all people, for some reason, leased him or lent him or let him borrow or gave him like these super like scientific cameras that are able to, that are normally used in like satellites and stuff, in low light environments, like in space and everything, so that he could film scenes in the movie by candlelight. If you remember in Barry Lyndon, there's a few scenes that's by candlelight, right? Barry Lyndon candlelight. The thing is they didn't use any ambient or external lighting for those scenes. They had to use a special camera that Stanley Kubrick was provided by NASA to make and like it looks. I'm looking at it right now. It looks pretty awesome, doesn't it? So why, other than the fact that 2001: A Space Odyssey is like every space junkie's favorite movie of all time, right? Even Star Wars people have to like admit that, like, yeah, it doesn't quite have the same commercial appeal, maybe, but as far as the cinematics, dude, there is no movie that can top 2001: A Space Odyssey, even today. And one of the movies that took the same approach was Oppenheimer, correct? Visually stunning. I didn't like the movie as much as I could have. I think what was it? The Odyssey is going to be good, though, I hope. But the idea was that they didn't use any CGI, right? So I think it looks better, like, because you know how like when movies come out in the theaters, and you're like, oh wow, look how what was the movie, Toy Story or whatever, or the special effects in Jurassic Park. It's like, oh, mind blowing, and then like 10 years later, you're like, this is a hunk of shit, right? This is a piece of shit. You don't have that problem if you don't use CGI to begin with, right? Like no matter how convincing AI or CGI or computer graphics get, there's always that period of time where like 10 years later, they've made such a vast improvement on the technology that the previous technology looks like shit. The only circumstances where that doesn't work is where people that take the time to not do it that way. Like 2001: A Space Odyssey, long before there was real CGI in movies and all that. But another similar approach was Christopher Nolan did the same thing for Oppenheimer, not using CGI, using like cotton balls and lighting and stuff for the atomic explosion or whatever, which, because of that reason alone, that movie will always visually, over time, hold up that in a way that that a lot of movies won't, just because they use technology that will eventually be antiquated at some point in time. So movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Oppenheimer will always, live forever kind of movies, at least visually. And if that's your cup of tea as far as the story is concerned, or whatever, dialogue, then it's probably your favorite movie ever then, right? If you're a Manhattan Project guru, then Oppenheimer might be your 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? But they visually stunning movies are super good like that, and Christopher Nolan's always done a really good job with that for sure. There's a reason why you can watch 2001: A Space Odyssey to this day and go, that movie looks like it was made 5 years ago, despite being made in 1968 or whatever it was. And the story's a bit weird. If you're not into that kind of thing, then whatever. But it's one of those like philosophical kind of like everybody debates. Oh yeah, oh Kaiser Sose or whatever, or like all these. Maybe not Kaiser Sose, but what's one of those movies where like, oh, Fight Club's one of those movies where they say like, oh, it turns out that one of the theories says that so and so, and this is all really just one person, right? And Marla Singer's not a real person either, right? Like everybody's got their own interpretation on what like the true meaning of the story is. Or that movie In Bruges where they're like, oh, this is really a movie, this is all just one guy's dream, right? Like there's all these alternative theories as to what the true storyline entails, or like what the director meant or whatever. 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of those kind of movies for sure, because there's a lot of weird kind of just like what do you do with any of it kind of things, the space baby and all that stuff. But the monolith, like, you would think there would be some conclusion at some point in time, but no, not really. But there are a bunch, if you ever really do want to delve down the rabbit hole, jump down the rabbit hole, look up some of the Stanley Kubrick stuff. And if there's another Stanley Kubrick, what about Stanley had the ability to just bring out the inner nut in people? I swear, dude. There's this documentary called the Toynbee or the Toynbee tiles, where these people, this guy got it in his mind that Stanley Kubrick had the recipe to like reincarnate dead people or something, and he would make these like foot by foot or like 2 foot by 2 foot kind of placards out of tiles and stuff, right? And he cut the floor of his car out, and he would drive around the entire planet, mind you. At some point in time, this one kind of, they narrowed it down. I don't want to ruin the ending of it, but they don't know who it was for sure. So it's sort of like the Zodiac mystery, right? Another interesting topic. But this guy, they found out, cut a hole in the floor of his car, and he would drive around with this radio antenna on his car and hijack people's television sets, like in the 70s or the 80s, and override the broadcast system of the radio and stuff. He had like an amplifier in his car and all this stuff. And he would make these tiles that made like these really bizarre accusations that like Stanley Kubrick had, through with the help of like some ancient Russian, not ancient, but like a Russian scientist, had discovered a way to reincarnate the dead. So he'd make these like really super bizarre tiles out of these, with these bizarre messages written on them, or actually not like you would like a mason or whatever would, or whatever a tile worker is. And he would drive around the planet, and these things showed up, like they started off in like Boston or like the Bronx or New York or somewhere up east or whatever. And by the end of it, these things were showing up like in Brazil and Norway, like all over the planet, and they believe it was all the same guy. And they narrowed it down to one suspect, but never got any hard confirmation who it was actually. But Stanley had that, I guess, that ability to bring out the nut in people is the point here. But it was a super good documentary. If you like the kind of just, I wouldn't call it taboo, but more interesting topics, more not lighthearted stuff, but a little thought engaging, but kind of bizarre. Not quite dark, but a little off-putting, you know what I mean? And it's a mystery, despite the fact that it was not like a serial killer or anything, but it was but a lot like the Zodiac, they have like some prime suspects, but they don't know for sure the person that was doing it. But they would say at some point in time, for this to have worked, the guy would have had to have gotten a car from somewhere in the United States and driven it, right? Or can you even to the Panama Canal? Can you even drive to South America? Either way, I'm not a great geography student, but you would think there's got to be a bridge over the Panama Canal somewhere, right? Let's see. Can you drive to South America from North America? You should be able to, right? South America. No, you cannot drive because where was it then? Between Panama and Colombia. Okay, so I wasn't entirely wrong, but not entirely correct either. So either way, though, he'd got a car. I guess if he flew there, or I guess, right, like Superman, flew there and started doing his thing in South America at some point, and was making these bizarre tiles, and like how the people, like early heydays of the internet or whatever, like one of these guys traced the origins of all of it back to like one post made on the internet in like 1990 something, really early on. Because people started noticing, what are these weird things? Like he would set the tiles and like write the words and like cut the tile into certain shapes and everything to like spell it out, like make it. And then he would find a spot in the road and put whatever type of cement or whatever you need on the bottom of it, on the sidewalk or the road or whatever, and he'd just drop it there, let it dry, and it'd be stuck there forever, right in the sidewalk or whatever. It was some of the most bizarre stuff, um, but it's really just one of those super interesting documentaries if you like that kind of thing. But they were like, yeah, we used to live next to this guy, and he was like real quiet and all this stuff, and like he'd get in his car and had this big ass antenna on the top of it, and every time he drove by, our TV would start to act weird, and we'd be able to hear him talking, you know, like how do you get away with doing that shit for that long a time or whatever? So that's the prime suspect as to who was laying the tiles everywhere. Another super interesting it was these two guys that hacked into a TV station. If you remember, if you've ever seen it, it was like two guys and a girl, I believe, that they had found a way to hijack the signal from a TV station in like the 70s or 80s by like overriding the satellite dish on their local broadcast affiliate or whatever for like CBS or whatever. And they were dressed like Max Headroom characters of all things. It was like, and they were just one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. Let's plug into the hardwired internet. Oh, another thing that's interesting is cicada. That stuff's pretty cool, isn't it? The cicada stuff's guy. Yeah, so I wish I had more to do as far as like something. This is my least favorite battleground. I gotta go put on house slippers after this. My feet are gonna freeze to the ground. But Stanley Kubrick's boxes in the beginning of it cover like how he detailed he essentially confessed to what had happened about the moon landing and all that stuff in the movie The Shining, supposedly. Like some of it's a bit of a stretch to make sense of, but how like the very beginning scene in The Shining, there's a guy that kind of looks like John F. Kennedy sitting at his desk, you know, and, I mean, you really have to, some of the stuff's really a stretch, but it's super entertaining. That at some point in time, they say John F. Kennedy actually had to go to Stanley Kubrick and ask for his help to help fake the moon landing or whatever. And I for one, believe that the moon landing certainly occurred, and they really did go there, and they actually did record it. Because at some point in time, you're like, sometimes it's just cheaper to actually do it. You know what I mean? Like, it would probably be more expensive to fake the moon landing than to actually just go there and do it. You know what I mean? Especially to do it to that degree of like meticulous kind of planning and all that stuff. We're like, yeah, it'd probably just be the same amount of work. You know, you can't necessarily pay people to be quiet forever. You know, and not that there's been anybody like credible come forward and say, oh yeah, well I worked on the whatever. Yeah, no, we faked the moon landing. I know people have posted videos of like, oh, this is Buzz Aldrin in this video admits that they didn't land on the moon or whatever. And when you see it, you're like, that's not exactly what he's saying here, you know. But I still entertain conspiracy theories because they're entertaining. It's not an instance, bro. Yeah, I'm still not entirely over the cold either. Derp. Can't people just be nice to each other? Like, is it that difficult to just be nice to people? I don't like people that aren't nice. Bullies. I don't like bullies. What's weird though is that people that get bullied turn into bullies. Like, how do you stop the cycle of abuse, bullying and bullies, right? Like, you don't learn from that shit, you know. Like, I got bullied growing up. It didn't turn me into one, you know. Makes you wonder: is there a genetic prediscursor or whatever, predisposition rather, to people that are bullies? I think everybody gets bullied though, you know, for the most part. Honestly though, getting bullied kind of does turn certain people into better people, and then it turns like the wrong people into the wrong people even more, right? So it makes you wonder, what is it? You know, genetic, nature. Like I say, I'm always concerned with the nature versus nurture thing, and how much nurturing does it take before something becomes genetic? You know, but there is a degree, like um, there's an amount of nurturing that you can do to somebody that eventually manifests itself genetically. You know, uh, in some way, shape, or form. And I'm pretty sure because how the fuck do they keep solving the Rubik's Cube faster every year? It doesn't make any sense, right? People are evolving quicker, right? Unless there's some collective memory or whatever, or some collective, you know, like muscle memory, or you know what I mean? Like the Rubik's Cube, every year since its creation, has been solved faster and faster every year. Now, people don't evolve that quick, you know, traditionally speaking, like it takes a while to evolve, you know, and that's strictly a nurture element or thing, right? Like you you wouldn't think that we scanned his genome, right? Uh, he's going to be a great Rubik's cuber. You know what I mean? So how on earth, despite the fact that genetically they say humans are identical almost, you know what I mean? Like an immeasurable difference between now and when the invention of the Rubik's cube occurred. Yet somehow, even the people just picking it up today on a bell curve, the outliers, the ones that can solve it the fastest, increases year over year since its creation. Yeah, that's baffling, right? It's one of the fuck if I know kind of things. But that's strictly a nurture thing, right? So is there some junk DNA that we don't necessarily pay any attention to that we might want to pay attention to in people that solve the Rubik's Cube super quick or something to determine like what amount of practice, repetition, whatever, potentially either kicks on a gene or enables a gene that would otherwise be dormant, right? It's a possibility, you know, because like I'm fascinated with the Rubik's Cube as it is, much less that factoid about it. machine gun, look at that. Still full health, though. Immune, really? Got him with that, though, didn't I? And that, like, how much of your, what they call ancestral memory, how much of your actual memory is genetic, if any? You know, there's probably a certain amount of it is, you know, despite the fact that your brain, well, that your stomach's not a brain, it tells your brain to tell you that you're hungry, you know what I mean? So your stomach, in some way, shape, or form, works like a component of the brain. I guess everything does then, doesn't it? Sort of. It's like when they say the eyes are like, they actually grow directly from the brain. It's like, doesn't everything kind of technically? No, 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 no. How do you stop it? Yeah, I have no clue how to win this battleground. Oh, great. Get it over with. Get it over with. Where on earth? Really? So I fucking crashed. Son of a bitch. So 50 minutes. Yeah, 10 more minutes left. I'm probably going to go ahead and call it now because I got to put some shoes on before my feet actually freeze to the ground. So it was fun chatting with you guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow, potentially later.